He's got a great bio. And then we have to talk about your underwater diving when we get there.
Yeah.
We'll let Robin. Ian was born in Lanarkshire, Lanarkshire, north of England. Grew up in Kenya, moved to upstate New York, and then North County, San Diego, Rancho Bernardo. He posted his post-secondary education is in chemistry and worked as research and development chemist before falling into surveying in 1988. He's licensed in California in 1993 and is currently licensed in Nevada and Colorado. He's worked in both private and public sectors and is currently the county surveyor for Alameda County, California, across the bay from San Francisco. He has served as CLSA state president in 2017 and is the current CLSA legislative committee chair and the CEAC surveyors committee vice chair. Worked on the CLSA PLS exam from 1994 to 2004 and has taught seminars in boundary, legal descriptions, lot line adjustments, and other aspects of land surveying. Ian and his wife, Laura, are avid scuba divers and just returned from a dive trip in Roatan in the Caribbean Bay island of Honduras. He has dive trips on tap to the Philippines in April, Cozumel in May, and Fiji next November. He's an underwater photographer. You're going to have to share some of these images. Email him for a link to his latest dive photo album. And he turns 65 next year and will log his 400th dive around his birthday. That is freaking fantastic. You have to throw your photo album in the chat if you can. But
yeah,
if you can find the link, that's I'm on the flip side, right? I like astrophotography, so I do love great underwater stuff. But
I've tried taking shots of moons a few times, and it's really cool with the PL10.
Yeah.
But I would really like to get into more astrophotography, but the light pollution in the Bay Area is just not terribly conducive.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, that's cool. I love it. Well, I appreciate you taking the time for jumping on. You've chimed in on a couple of times and had some good conversations on some other topics in the past, although this is the first time you're actually presenting. But obviously there's a great need and conversations on this particular topic. And so, as always, we thank everybody for jumping on and thank Ian for presenting tonight. So I love it. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Are you seeing my shared screen now? Okay.
Yep, you are good.
Cool. All right, so let's start this puppy and slideshow from the beginning.
There you go.
Okay, so you're seeing my the slideshow presentation, not my notes.
Yeah, nope, we have your note side. So if you want to, you can stop share and then change the other screen or something.
Cool. Okay.
It's always the tricky part, getting the
Yeah,
PowerPoint presentation up on the right screen.
There we go.
Yeah, I thought it was some chicks.
Oh, my neighbor.
Okay, so now you should be seeing the slideshow.
We have nothing up.
Nothing. Okay. That's why I was trying to get a chance at doing these beforehand.
No, it was up. It was up the first time around. It just went from when you went to like the presenter mode, it flipped over to your note side.
Nuts. All right. And now I've completely lost all of it. I got too many screens open here, I think.
Yeah, sometimes you can say like screen 1 or screen 2, or you can actually click on the actual like PowerPoint part of it. But
yeah, I'm still not getting to where I can see.
While he's figuring that out, look at that cabin behind me. I got my 12-volt Christmas lights up, no grid or generator running.
All just on AA batteries? Oh no, you said on a big battery, yeah, 12-volt battery.
Yeah, I got a massive bank. There's some cool technology, silicone gel. It's holds 95% of its charge down to -40.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, they're the bomb.
Doesn't like it, Ian?
Yeah, it's really is hiccuping. I should be on screen one. So I run the slideshow from the beginning. Screen one on my side, it's showing the screen, and it, okay.
Got to share your screen, Ian?
That's what I'm gonna do.
Trying.
Let's just do this. Okay, now you should be seeing this plus the slide deck.
Nothing yet.
Nothing. Okay. Resumes.
Interesting. Yeah, you got it the first time right off. But
Okay, so you have a slide up there now.
Well, unless I'm missing something. You guys don't have a slide, right? Nobody has. Okay. I just see the gallery. Yeah. I was like, maybe I'm missing it.
Okay.
Almost.
Here it comes.
Oh, here it comes.
Okay.
There you go. And now you got the real one because that's
Looks good. Looks good.
that's your presenter mode. There you go.
Okay, here we go.
Nice.
All right.
You're good now.
Basically, what I wanted to do here, because one of the things that I run into a lot as a county surveyor with maps being submitted here, is that there is a real lack of understanding about what's happening with simultaneous conveyances, which are really resurveys of maps that are already recorded. And part of it is getting back into understanding what sequential surveys conveyances are all about. And it's because of the problems with sequential conveyances that, at least in California, we went to the Subdivision Map Act in 1972 to force simultaneous conveyances, because the kick with the simultaneous conveyance with a properly done map is that it establishes control and subdivides a large area that you treat kind of like the analogy I use is jigsaw puzzle, where all the parcels are pieces in the jigsaw puzzle, and you kind of need to put them together to be able to figure out what the picture looks like. And that's the idea of what the map is. And I'm going to use an example here of sequential conveyances here. This is actually, believe it or not, a photograph from aerial photograph from 1931. University of California, Santa Barbara has an aerial photography library, georeferenced library that you can go in, find you the area that you're looking for, and pull up maps like this. And I've loaded these up together. This is where I live. And in fact, where I actually live is about right in here. This was in an area of East Bay that all these were actually cherry orchards from the late 1800s through the mid 1930s. And you can see that this whole, you see all these subdivisions around the blocks split up around it. This is actually 6-block area. In 1939, things are a little bit different. And then here you see that my street has been punched through, and Morgan is put through here, but these streets never came through. So this block that I'm on, and I'm about right in here, is really 3 blocks long. And the point that I'm making, and then the freeway came in 1965, built early 1965. My house is still right here, and then this is my house right here. This is 2022, after we had bought in 2017 and moved in. But the point that I'm making here is that when I moved in, This is the Rancho San Leandro. This is San Leandro's portion of this. This is the Estudillo tract, and these are the 6 blocks that where I live. This is where I live, right about in here. They were all owned originally by Jeremy Regan, and this map is 1875. The top portion of the block, this is Morgan here, and now the freeway is up here. This was subdivided by a subdivision map, and you can see that there's monuments established here that establish where the blocks are and where the lots are within the blocks. Not so much to the south here. This is the assessor's parcel map for the southerly portion, well, it's actually the westerly portion of the 3-block set. This is a big church here, and you'll notice on the next sheet here that there are these distances crawling up the streets, and every single one of these descriptions start at some point here, or there's a couple of other points, and they go up the sideline of the road, bearing and distance only. Doesn't talk about going up the sideline or anything. It's bearing distance to a point, bearing distance to a point, bearing distance, bearing distance, bearing distance, and every single one of them is the same way. And the problem is that they have different starting points. They'll start at a point X number of feet up from the intersection of Bancroft or any one of these. There's nothing in here that limits this. It's strictly a numbers game. It's bearings and distances, nothing else. And the descriptions are horrible, and they've been badly typed over the decades. You can see this one here with all the wonderful typos and everything in it. 14,325 feet. Well, it's actually 143.25 feet. And it's a mess. This is actually my next door neighbor's property. Same kind of deal, but it's coming from the different direction than mine did. My point of beginning is to the west and on Maud. His point of beginning is to the east and along the the southern line of Dolores. It's a headache. So this is an aerial view of my house. And when I moved in, my neighbors, Sung Park lives here, and Mark Schifrin lives here, and I've never met the guy over behind me yet. And of course, everybody is talking to me. And well, as soon as they found out I was a land surveyor, I was like, "Oh, so you're going to do a boundary survey?" And I said, "Not on your life." The title work here to be able to figure out how to put all these together, which came first, how everything was laid out, would be prohibitive. And they were going, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, it would cost probably somewhere between $80,000 and $100,000 worth of title work just to figure out whose property came first and figure out where the parcels were." And so they're going, "Well, this is land surveyor, don't you need to know that?" I said, "No, because Mark, you and I have a wall that starts here and runs all the way to the back. I have a wall that runs across the back here, and Sun Park, we have a fence that runs all the way down here. What I bought was this house between these fences and from here out to the front. If there's a problem, I have title insurance. I'm not surveying it." Interestingly enough, there is a cut cross here, and there are a few other cut crosses that I found up and down both sides of the block as I've taken walks. Not a single one of them is a uniform distance off the back of the sidewalk. They all pretty well look like they're floating down property lines, but it's kind of scary. And I'm not gonna rock the boat.
So all of these blocks were just meets and bounds descriptions. There was never, yeah. That was Schroeder put that in there. Yeah. Okay.
These 6 were all meets and bounds descriptions.
Wow.
And as I said, Mark's starts off way the hell up the block and comes down this way and then wraps around his property. Mine starts on the other side of the block, way the hell down at the other corner, and comes up and then wraps around. So, and there's no calls. It's strictly distances. And one thing that I was very fortunate when I first started surveying. I was in San Diego County, and I got taken the second Tuesday I was ever in the business. I was taken to my first CLSA meeting, and I met Kurt Brown, who was wonderful to listen to over the years. And one of the things that he always used to say is, you know, if you have to rely on math, the only thing you know is that you've screwed up the boundary. And one of my other mentors, Chuck Willis, used to say, "Dang, you can math the heck out of it, but if you're on the wrong line, you're on the wrong line." And unfortunately, too many people ascribe math to boundary surveying. I have a map, and it says you go from this point 50 feet over and then back 100 feet, and there we go. So I should be able to find these 2 points on this street and go 3 blocks over and lay out the corners of my client's property, right? And I sit back and I think, wow. And I've been told many times, you know, we're, as land surveyors, we're expert measurers. And I think if you really were an expert measurer, you would understand why that statement is really, really dangerous. Because every measurement comes with an error, no matter what it is. And some of the errors you don't have much control over. Another, this is a really interesting chunk of ground here. This is just south of the office here. And this was an area that was owned, this whole area was owned by a gentleman by the name of Faxon Atherton, who is the namesake of the town of Atherton, which is has the distinction of being the town with the highest per capita price, home price in the entire country. And there are no businesses allowed in the town of Atherton. It's all residential. And you won't touch a single one of those houses for less than a cheap junky shack is 1.52 million. He owned all of this area, and he died a very, very rich man. He had a very good attorney who was his executive, a very bright man who had clearly a lot of education and a lot of people helping him out. And upon Atherton's death, he broke all of these big parcels up into larger parcels of land. You can't really see it there, but if I do this, these were chunks of land that they were all created at the same time. And they very carefully start off at one single point and run up the same line, and they go wrap around like this, and then the next one goes up like this, and it comes and wraps around like this, and they all fit together like a glove. Well, what they've done by creating all of those, by the executive action of the executive of the estate, what they've done is they've, instead of having a map to create these, they actually have created these by court order for the disposition of the estate. And if you're going to survey this subdivision here, you need to be able to understand how it fits with this parcel here, because this, although this subdivision was the very first one recorded of these three, well, there's actually about half a dozen subdivisions here. This was the very first subdivision recorded. This line here, the common line here, was created at the very same time as this common line and this common line. So you don't just get to say, see, that's one of the things about the simultaneous conveyances. Just because you have a map that's recorded in 1935 doesn't mean that it's senior to parcels, adjoining parcels that weren't recorded until 1965. In this case, these were created in 1875 or 1870. And here's a couple of the deeds. These are handwritten deeds in the books. The estate of Faxon D. Atherton. Nice big parcels of land. Now, here's an interesting deal that I'm kind of throwing out there, because one of the things that I'm trying to do here is that I don't have any answers. And anybody who tells you that there is a cookbook way to determine boundaries is somebody you need to avoid at all costs. Every single situation is entirely factually driven, and every single situation can be argued multiple ways. And the one thing that I learned a long time ago was that if you're the first guy in there and your solutions don't screw up the neighborhood, document your solution, monument your solution, and throw on your map statements to the effect of future surveyors would do well too, or basically what you're saying is, this is what I did. So now, John Stahl, I can see him smiling there. John Stahl comes in after I've done a survey, and he says, well, you know, I'm going to soak my client for about 50,000 bucks here to prove that Wilson is wrong for 200. It ain't gonna happen. John Blake in San Diego once told me that it's the dinner plate theory of boundary surveys. He used to set 6-inch diameter brass discs at the corners of his more contentious surveys, because he figures that if you're looking at a 6-inch brass disc, you're probably not going to say it's wrong. And his idea was, you know, people used to say, oh, you're taking on so much liability. His idea was, really? I'm wiping out the liability. Are you really going to go in there and disregard my map? And
If that doesn't work, use a 12-incher, you know, and everybody be on the cap.
There you go. And if your map is done properly and it ends up in court, more than likely, the judge is going to look there and go, did you not see this map? This guy's the entryman here. Why are we in court? What's going on here? Unless you've got something that clearly is completely wrong with this map. And this is an item here that's really worth looking at, because this is one I see coming up regularly. Proration. Let's prorate. We got to prorate. We've got these 2 points in here, got 7 lots, got to prorate. No, you don't. This is a map for the guys on the East Coast. This is a brand new map. It's 1868. It's not like 1437 like you guys deal with. But this is an area of Oakland, the Brookhurst tract in Oakland. And if you take a look at this map here, one of the things that you're going to see is that you don't have a rectangular block like we do over here. You've got a block that's at an angle here. And if you take a look at this, you'll see that these lots are all 100 feet. And these are all, it's 100, I think it's 150 feet. And these are all 50 feet. And then whatever's left over is stuffed over here in the end. That's something to really consider. Because what this guy developing this has said is, I want this to be 150 feet by whatever it is, the width here. And I want this to be 50 by 140, and so on down the block. And then all of this down here, by looking at these oddball numbers here, this is where everything goes. Shortage or overage.
Let the DOT figure it out.
Oakland is really kind of a cool place. Oakland has a lot of what they call City of Oakland monument maps. And they kind of have gone through and installed monuments in the intersections. They may not be at center line, but you see monument lines. And the other thing that they've done is they went through and they located the curbs and established the distance from the face of curb to the right-of-way lines. And you can use that City of Oakland monument maps to establish the block based off the curves. In fact, it hasn't been recorded yet, so I'm loath to show you, but I'll see if I can find the area, and I'll show you exactly what's going on with a situation like that where a guy is actually using a curve. There's no monuments left in the area, so the guy's using the curb lines. We worked out a way to use the curb lines to figure out exactly where his property is. This is the assessor's plat for this area, and you see that the previous map, this was where the lots were intended to be. And as we are really want to do, we kind of chopped it up any way we wanted to. Which was fine up until 1972. Anybody could subdivide a piece of property. You could say the westerly 40 feet of lots 10 and 11, boom, done, and be done with it. Now that creates a hell of a lot of problems because finding the westerly 40 feet of lots 10 and 11 might not be as easy as that sounds. And in fact, this actually belongs to a church. Here's a legal description of it. And it basically says portion of lots 10 and 11, and it starts off at a distance over from a point and then up and around and up and around, and it really doesn't do a whole lot here other than start off at an intersection. And then it goes right angles and right angles and right angles. You got nothing to hang your hat on. It's just strictly distances. Here's an aerial photo of that parcel. And it's not the prettiest of properties, but it still deserves your best intentions to survey. And this is a monument map that I'm talking about. And we've got the monument maps here, and you can see the curb lines around here, and there are some monuments here that okay, so we've got a monument listed here, new monument set here and here, and you've got although you can't see it well enough on the resolution here, you've got distances 10 feet from face of curb to the property line. That looks like it's probably 8 feet. That might be 6 feet. That might be 12 feet over there to the property lines. Now, the unfortunate thing today is that all of these monuments have been destroyed. There's nothing out there. So in order to survey that, you might go around the entire block to pick up the face of curves and use the monument map to be able to establish this outline here. Now you have you have a dilemma, because you're going to measure this distance here and come up with a different distance than you have on the record. So what do you do? Do you prorate? What do you hold? What works? And I'm going to tell you that John and I both know that we were part of a huge adventure that started off with a comment from somebody who pointed out, in a similar situation, your work has just begun. And this is not a boundary. This is not a boundary that can be resolved in the office easily, because you're going to come up with 3 or 4 different solutions and try them out in the field. What fits? What works? What doesn't work? And even though these monuments are all gone, we have the exterior boundary of the block that can be reestablished from the curbs. But something else, you have one of the biggest monuments you'll ever see in your life, the houses. Because if you look at this, you'll notice that these houses are using up the maximum amount of the property they can. I mean, this building here is all of the property. If you locate the property lines, if you locate the building lines, you can help yourself establish where the property lines are based off those. And in fact, even through here, most of the areas, particularly downtown or in suburbs, you'll have the zoning code that gives you a setback distance from the side of the house to the property line, which means that your house has to be 5 foot off the property line. And what you'll find if you go out and measure this is that the distance from the wall here to the wall here is probably somewhere about 9.99 feet. It might be as much as 10.05 feet. What I mean by that is that the property line can be developed from running splits between the houses. Is that the be all and end all? No, because you need to be able to do that with multiple places around the block to see what fits. Do 50s across here fit and leaving the remainder over here? Might be. It might be 50.02 fits really well with the remainder left over here. It's something that you need to be able to calculate and calibrate yourself to. That's the point of the basis of bearings. You know, people sit back and go, you know, basis of bearings. I got a $80,000 GPS receiver here. I don't need a basis of bearings. Yes, you do. Because the basis of bearings is your calibration point. You have 2 points, and my deal with the basis of bearings, a lot of county surveyors have other points on them. 2 points that somebody can find in the future and set up on them. And I'm telling you right now that the bearing between these 2 points today is this, and the distance between these 2 points based from which I'm basing my survey is this. You go out there and you set up on the same 2 points and measure the distance between them. And if it's a 1/10 different or 2/10 difference or a foot different or whatever, all that's saying is that your equipment and my equipment have a calibration ratio. There's an area of the city of San Diego that most people will remember. When it was laid out by a guy who had a very, very old chain. He was a cheap SOB. He was a land surveyor. We're all cheap. And it had stretched out badly. So if you go down and measure his 100-foot lots, if you get anything less than about 101 feet, you have a problem with your equipment. It's not right. And it actually, if you go around the blocks, you'll find that there is a ratio there, a percentage ratio that holds all the way through that. And it's been very successfully defended in court that 100 feet does not mean 100 feet in this area. You'll find that it means whatever your ratio, and your ratio will hold up really, really well. The survey was top-notch methods. The chain was very old and very stretched. Same deal. So going back in here and, you know, figuring out where the houses are is a terrific idea. So earlier this year, this gentleman came in and he presented a map that he's subdividing this area back over here. And he had nothing, no monuments or anything on his map. I'm thinking, well, first of all, how the hell are you figuring out where your boundary is? Second of all, what do you mean there's no monuments? There should be monuments all over the place. The record maps show the monuments at all of these intersections. You're crazy. Well, it turns out that just a few years ago, before I actually sat down in this chair, the county went through and repaved all of these streets. And you can guess what happened. They're all gone. Nothing's left there. In California, we have what we call 8771B corner records, and what they are designed to do is document the position of any monument that is found that may be damaged by a construction project. So theoretically, if you're the guy who's doing the repaving on the street here, you should have a surveyor on the hook that goes through here and tells you what monuments might be destroyed, and he'll file an 8771B corner record to that effect. And they're intended to be very simple documents. The idea is that the surveyor is saying, I don't care what this is. I'm not telling you what part of the land that this is or what this represents. I'm telling you that I found a 1-inch iron pipe with Mike Schroeder's tag in the top of it. And it's going to get destroyed by this construction project. So I'm going to set tangent ties to this thing and file a document so that when Cindy Kay comes through there trying to do her survey, she's going to be able to sit back and say, well, the monument is gone, but I have these ties that Mike set that I can reestablish where that point, or I can reestablish where that point was, and I'm good to go for that. When the project is done, those ties can be used to reestablish where that point was and reset that monument. When we wrote that legislation, the idea was that people would be doing this as simply as possible. And literally, you know, you come to an intersection like this, literally put in 2 nails on top of curves here, set up, and we set up a T16. We actually have a device that it used to be called a cone sight. And it was a collar sleeve that went down on the top of a cone with a little arm that stuck out that you could drop a plumb bob down on the actual point in the middle of the street. And it used the string to see through. Set up your T6, you know, one side of the street, all over the monument, the nail you just set, and sight through your string and put somebody on line to put a nail on the other side. So a decent crew can set ties around the entire intersection in about 15 minutes using a T16. Then, incredibly, we go back in after the fact with network RTK and hit all 4 points in the middle of the intersection point if it's still there. Because now all we're really doing is getting distances through here. If this monument gets destroyed, we go out with a chalk line. You can actually run, because the intersection of the 2 lines run from opposite block corners is where the monument was. You go out there with your snap line and snap the intersection, and there you go. It doesn't need to be very difficult. You don't need to get out there and do traverses or anything. It's just boom, there it is, done. Move on. But the point that I'm going to make here is that all of these were gone. We had nothing to work with. So here's the assessor's parcel map for one of the areas, and we'll go through this 172nd Street here. And you know, 20 years ago, somebody had told me that I would be using this method to do boundary surveys. I would have told them they were nuts. We have a high-end Regal scanner. This is the subdivision map here. The freeway has come in through the south end of this job, and I've lost my mouse. East 14th is still in. San Pedro is 172nd. San Remo is 173rd. Santa Ana is 171st. And Rogerio is still Rogerio. But what we have done is we don't have the maps that Oakland has, the monument maps. But what we've done is we've come in here and we can look at the face of curves all the way through around the entire area. And we can also locate the houses and develop where the center lines of the street should be, where the property lines going back should be. And we actually use our Regal scanner to do that. Run, set control around the block and include the control in the scans. And we go through and scan. And this is a scan. Those purple lines there are developed from the scans of the curves. And that's actually defining points every 5 feet along the break in plane from the top of the curve to the face of the curve. The software is actually going through there, defining those 2 planes and setting points along there every 5 feet. Then we just do a best fit linear regression from all those points to come up with those purple lines there. And on this westerly portion here of 172, those 2 lines, and they're old curves, those 2 lines are less than 10 seconds apart. That's freaking phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
And if you take a look at the sidelines of the houses, the sides of the houses there, we're actually able to use those and say, okay, you got fences there. Some of the houses have driveways down, and so you can't quite use that side of the house very well. But what you do get to use is the house on the other side that doesn't have the driveway. Take a look at that and look at the 5-foot offset to that line, and then fit all of those pieces together. And you suddenly find that you have a very, very constant change through that block there to be able to establish where those sidelines are for the properties from a scan. I mean, we're not collecting information to the point where we're scanning where the actual brass boundaries are, or the brass monuments are, but what we are doing is saying, hey, here's the houses. Mike Calamari showed me some photographs of the La Jolla colonies when it was first built back in the late 1800s, early 1900s. And the amazing thing was there that these are rectangular streets, rectangular blocks. And you can see from those photographs from the early days that they actually had set white 2x2 hubs, posts at the corners of each of the lots. And they had signs on them that said, this is lot 21, this is lot 22, lot 23. And they were really designed 25 feet wide. Never really intended that you're going to have one 25-foot lot. It was just that was the portion. So the people would walk down the street or ride down the street in the carriage, and they'd say, oh, look, let's buy lots 22 through 26. So we'll have a 100-foot wide parcel. They would buy it, and the contractors would use those hubs to lay out the houses. And in California, land is very, very expensive. So I want that house shoved as far forward as I can to meet the front setback. I mean, it's butt up against the front setback. And I want it as far as wide as I can to match the side setbacks. Back, I want that's where I want my backyard to be, and my cookouts and everything. So I want that to be as open as I possibly can. So by shoving it all the way forward and making sure that the house goes from setback to setback on the sides, there we go. So all of these houses were built that way, and those wooden hubs disappeared. They were never monumented. The wooden hubs disappeared. So now, to coin a phrase, the monuments are the houses. They're the best evidence of where the property lines were. There's a court case on the East Coast that they basically allowed that evidence through, and the judge said that I'm going to allow these as an exception to the hearsay evidence rule, and the houses are now the best evidence of where the property lines were intended to be. Wow. So regularly I get the question, you mean you're trying to tell me that the houses are monuments? Yeah. Yeah, they are. They're the best damn monuments you have out there. they're freaking solid. And it blows my mind. Every time we do this, we go through here and we measure these properties, the sidelines of the houses. They're so parallel. Because contractors at the time were building the house the best that they possibly could based off all those hubs that mark the corners of the lots. When I started off, we used to lay out the subdivision. We used to do what are called 20s and 80s. So you got 200 home subdivision, rectangular streets, and we would, before we would set the monuments that were getting destroyed by construction, we'd go in and set what we call 20s and 80s, and they were rebars that we'd pound 20 foot back along the sidelines from the front corner and 80 foot back. And then the layout guys had what they call the lot book, and every single lot had the house that was going on that lot and the double ties from the 20s and 80s on both sides of the lot to two corners on either side of the house that they could use to lay out the foundation from. So even today, you know, the 20s and 80s, anybody who's ever done any subdivision work in Southern California who's older, there's
Ian, can I interject something?
Yeah.
Okay, so two things, like when you're looking at those old surveys, you know, in Alaska, there may be, you know, 1950s, but you got 1930s, and they're running, you know, square blocks, and they hit some irregular boundary like a right of way there. You have to, you know the history of what the surveyors were doing. I mean, they had no freaking AutoCAD, Civil 3D, or computers or anything. And a lot of times, at least up here, I mean, they ran 100, 100, 100, 100, 100, hit the irregular boundary. They put their scale out or whatever. So, I mean, that last bit, that last closure distance into your irregular boundary, a lot of times are wild things. And one of the things that I got mentored early in my career was, you know, the powers of a properly weighted least squares adjustment. You got a plat that's all screwed up, through all the dimensions of least square adjustment, and they'll show you all the ones that fit and the ones that don't. Yeah. And same with your house foundations. And I've done that. We have a town site in Seward, which is probably the oldest thing in Alaska. And just like California, I mean, I just like flip out when I hear you talking about hundreds of a foot on the building offsets, but put all those in, tie the houses, give a weight of, it's supposed to be on the property line, plus or minus whatever, you know, you can play with your weights, 200 or 300, give them 1/10 of a foot from those wood stakes that you talked about, and let that whole block adjust, and you'll see the outliers or something that doesn't fit. But it's a lot of extra effort, and I'm an old dog and I like freaking computers and stuff, but you know, if you throw this stuff in AutoCAD and you're trying to get the curb lines and the house faces and what the offsets were, I mean, if you're really tuned up on least squares adjustments and you deal with the weightings, it's amazing. You mean, you get that solution of where that whole block, all those boundaries best fit, best fit to the least squares adjustment. And I'd stand up in court, and I have stand up in court and defend that. Because if at the end of the day, if you put these boundaries in where, you know, you've done exactly what you said, you have all this due diligence, but some other attorney says, well, how'd you come up with this house doesn't fit within 300s with the property line, this one by 1/10? But a properly weighted least squares adjustment is a very powerful tool. So I'll shut up now.
No, I agree with you absolutely. But here's the kick, is that if you're relying strictly on the math, it's harder to tell the story. If you use the math to underpin the story you're telling, then you're far better off. And the one thing that one of the first attorneys I ever worked with told me is, forget all this math shit. You have to learn how to tell the story that the judge is going to be interested in listening to. And I watched over the years, and in many cases, you'll see the surveyor on the other side, and he's talking about, and we took the residuals, and the judge is just going, oh. And then somebody else will get up there and say, well, Your Honor, when they built the curbs, they knew what they were doing back then in 1914. And you know, it's amazing. These things are just parallel as hell, and the houses are all slapped there. And we did all this, and that's how we came up with the lines. You know, and you tell them the story of how this developed, and Bill and Martha driving the carriage down the street in La Jolla colonies, and picking their locks and the whole bit. And that's the story that's going to keep him listening. And at the end of that is, the end of the day, he's going to look at it and go, well, I don't remember that math crap,
but exactly. So that's another presentation about how to be an expert witness, because you have to weave that story. Everything that you said, you know, is the background. And he said, here's a tool that I used to best fit what these people were doing, the curb lines, the building faces, what Fred, Martha did, or whatever. But yeah, I agree. I would never go into court and say, oh yeah, I have a mathematical solution for properly weighted least squares. I'm going to say all that history, and this is the best tool that I use to resolve and best fit all of that.
That's right. You back the story up with the math, not the other way around. And part of the deal is, you know, I hope to God that everybody has read Justice Cooley's dictum. Because the one thing to take away from that, and the older guys are all smiling and nodding their heads, the one thing to take away from that is that the surveyor who relies on math is going to screw up a neighborhood as fast as he possibly can. And the idea is and should be that the surveyor should be there to perpetuate harmony, not destroy harmony. Somebody once told me that there are 3 positions for every line. There's the described line, the conveyed line, and the occupied line. When all 3 of them are in the same place, you're gold. When all 3 of them are a foot apart or more, your life just became very interesting, trying to figure out what's going on. But the kick is that when you come down to it, what you are going to do, number one, you don't have the authority to change property lines or change ownership. The only people that have that authority are the owners on either side of the line. Your rights and responsibilities extend only as far as helping them document what they need to either take it to court so a judge can make the decision when they can't, or to help them decide what they want to do to solve the problem. And you can do that as a land surveyor, help them as much as possible to make the decision, come to the decision, even if it means getting them together in your office, in your conference room after hours, and going through all the possible solutions with them over a couple of bottles of Rubber Mondavi Opus 1 at $250 to $300 a bottle, depending upon the vintage. And come up with a solution and document it. File the appropriate documents, the deeds, maps, and the whole bit. And believe me, if you can get both parties in the room to discuss the situation and move it forward, it'll be a hell of a lot cheaper than going to court. Because you know, court, the only thing you know about court is you're going to spend somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000 or more, to get a decision that probably sucks because it's the first round of court and it's going to be based on equity and not property law. And then you're going to go to the appellate court, and the appellate court is going to cost you anywhere 100,000 or and double or more to get 3 people who are going to look at your case based on the rule of law. And you may get a decision that you really you like or may not like. But bottom line is, you have a boatload of money you're going to spend to get there. It's a whole lot cheaper to buy a case of Robert Mondavi and drink it all down in your office. And whatever you can do to your job should be to facilitate the solution, not create problems. And unfortunately, I see so many surveyors who create problems. Like, well, you know, I got this $80,000 total station here, and it says, yep, that line runs right through the middle of your garage. Sorry. And off they go to leave everybody pissed off at each other. When they should be sitting back going, we have a problem. Here's where the problem. You need to dig into why the problem happened and understand how to deal with it and help these people deal with it. We had a situation earlier today that piece of property, the street was abandoned. The local jurisdiction, the county abandoned that in 1984. And nobody ever really had dealt with the problems that is created until today. And amazingly, when a street is abandoned like that, basically the local jurisdiction is saying, I'm done. It goes back. But what happens if nobody really knows how to take it back? And in this particular case, there's an angle point in the street, and the monuments that are set out in the street are not on the center line. They're just a monumented line. And the common line between the two properties comes down to the angle point. And the assessor is now trying to run the new line from that angle point over to the monument line. Just why not? And my point is, first of all, it's not your job to make that decision. It belongs to the two people who own the property. And there's an angle point there that goes out to the monument of the street. That the line, the sideline between the two properties, if you extend that out, comes up with a different position. It's only about a half a foot, but it's a different position for the line. And there are a couple of other ways to do it. You could take the angle and split the angle, and you come up with yet another position. And then I started looking at it, and I realized that the entire street was taken off the property to the north, to where these two guys are. So actually, it doesn't go out to the monument line or to the center line. It goes across to the other side of the street. So now we're actually talking about a 1.5 to 2 foot difference between the positions for these lines. And it's like, okay, the only people that can make this decision are the two property owners who now own coterminous lots along this abandoned portion of the street. And if they can't make the decision, then one of them is going to have to sue the other one and take it to court where a judge will make the decision for them. But it's not the surveyor's decision, and it is not the assessor's decision to make. Really cool way that's done in a few jurisdictions in Southern California, particularly, and well, throughout California. When you do a subdivision like that, you file another sheet that's a disposition sheet that says, if these streets are ever abandoned, this is how the lots are going to get split up. It's recorded at the same time the subdivision is recorded. So now you don't have any questions about this. Well, we're abandoning the street. Okay, pull out the disposition sheet. There you go. We're done. But no, it was decided at the time the subdivision was approved. There you go. That's what's going to happen when the streets are abandoned. Done. Would have saved a whole lot of trouble in this particular case. But again, the idea is that the surveyor should be part of the solution, not perpetuate the problem. And if you don't get that, read coolly, because you're sitting there measuring, making your measurements and going, ma'am, not my problem. That's where the measurement is. And all that means is that Nick LaFond is on the deal here. He and I disagree over the measurement of the property line. So I do a survey, Nick comes along, does a survey, says, no, he's wrong by half a foot, it belongs over here. Then Trevor Evans comes in and says, nope, it's half a foot the other way. Nick's completely out to lunch. These guys are crazy. And then Kerry Reinerson comes in and says, they're all wrong, it's over here. The line moves around like, I don't know what moves around really quickly that I can say in public. The key here is, and the key fact to take away is that the line doesn't go where it should be mathematically if it was perfectly set. The line goes where it was set originally. No matter how bad Mike screwed up that survey, unless it's so bad that we got all kinds of problems with it.
Hey, now in Alaska, if we're within a foot or a length, you know, it's 8/10 or 6600s.
Yeah. And I pick on Mike because he's an old BLM guy, but it's like, hey, what was the GLO error when you checked in? It's like, yeah, are we within half a mile? It's like, yeah, good enough.
Hey, Ian,
One part in 1280 for rectangular.
there you go. Ian, while you're still on this screen, there was a question in the chat a couple minutes ago about how do existing property walls play into your scanned solution? If the houses are the monuments, what are the walls?
The walls, here's the kick with the wall. The wall may or may not be on the property line. And it may be a case that, Ben Shinneberry is my next door neighbor. And I want to put up a fence. And I say, Ben, what I really want to do is put up this nice louvered fence with a lattice top on it. And Ben goes, screw you, that looks like shit. Okay, so I put it up on my property line. I put it 6 inches into my property line. And so it's like, Ben, forget it, I'm building the whole damn thing. It's all on my property, go away. There it is. So now somebody comes along and says, wow, there's a fence, that must be the property line. No, it's not. Most of the time, walls and fences are not built on your property, or not built on the property line. They're built on one side or the other. So the walls may or may not help you. And remember, if you have a wall, you may have a footing. You may need to keep that footing on your property. So that wall may be a foot off the property line, or 8 inches, or whatever that spread footing was designed to be back in the day that it was built. So the walls are kind of interesting. The house is even better. And if you can see the foundation down toward the bottom of the house and pick those points, those are actually the best. Because as you come up from the foundation is going to be laid out. Anybody who's laid out a subdivision the foundation is going to be laid out onto the lines. And when you go up the side of the house there, you're going to put all kinds of crap on there, the window trims and all the fancy gingerbread and everything. So as low as if you can get down to the subdivision, to the foundation line, you're going to be best for when things really start getting hairy. And it might take a lot of field work. It's like, wow, you mean, holy crap, that's going to take like 2 days worth of field work. Okay. What's your problem? That's what it takes to do the job. And You don't go to the garage and say, well, you know, I need the head replaced on my vehicle. Holy crap, that's going to take 3 hours. It's like, are you kidding me? It's what the job takes. End of story. And are you telling me that A, you don't know how to do it, or B, there's so many people in your area that are crap surveyors who can't do the job properly that you can't afford to do the job properly? Like, okay. You know, if everybody were jumping off the bridge, would you jump off the bridge too? And I understand the dilemma. And I understand the problem with doing the right thing in many cases where you've got a whole lot of people in the area who are not doing the right thing and are cutting their costs to the bone and doing shortcuts. But the first time that you pull a shortcut and you get caught is going to outweigh any money you might have made differently. It's too easy to do the job properly. If you understand what's going on and if you think about it, and as Mike said, you really need to follow in the footsteps of the surveyors who went before you and figure out how they did what they did. It doesn't mean that you have to pull out a Gurley Mountain Transit and a chain. It means that you need to understand how they did their survey and walk their footsteps to recreate.
So can I interject something there? I raised my hand politely. You know, that's a big thing for young surveyors. So you got the low baller that comes in there. He's got this block, and he I don't know, Alaska, maybe $300 to go survey your lot. Goes out and says, well, we got to get this done this afternoon. And he bangs some crap in there for markers. And then you come in and you do this full analysis and you figure this out right. But it's really hard to put on your record a survey, which then might be challenged that you're going to reject these monuments from Joe Surveyor, California license, whatever. And because maybe you called him and he says, well, I don't want to talk to you about it. That was my $300 job and I'm moving on. My office is full today. But you have to, you know, and if you can't get any information out, you get a bright, shiny, and it looks like it's junk out there. It just creates this wall of chaos. He came in from one corner and shot it in, whatever. For me as a licensed land surveyor, that was a hard one. I called some guys out, and a couple of them I turned in the board of registration because it says not due diligence. You didn't do this whole job right. I mean, the cost to do this lot could not be done professionally for what Joe Surveyor did. And then you just throw it back in his face and say, defend your stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree.
I'll shut up again.
No, those are great points. And I can't stress enough, if people around you are doing garbage work, it doesn't mean that you have to perpetuate that and do equally garbage work. It just means that you have to stand out above the rest of the people who are doing the work. And one of the things that I've always thought is that it's really kind of a shame that it doesn't take very much to stand out head and shoulders above competitors just for doing the right thing. I see John laughing there because I think we're in the same camp. And it kind of says something about the profession, not about you. Now, it says that there's 26 chats there, and I've lost my mouse. Bloody battery died.
Yeah, there's I asked the questions that were in there. A lot of it's just kind of some dialogue back and forth about just certain things. You know, every surveyor charging well below market rates to do their job incorrectly is doing a disservice to all, right? So it's just lots of kind of conversations along the way. I've got all the questions though.
Okay, now
So-
I understand that the people who are here are people who are not people who need to listen to this message. The people here
Yeah.
already understand the message. And I realize that I'm preaching to the choir.
We are the choir.
Yes.
But there is people that watch outside of this, so we will talk to them.
And hopefully the message will eventually get home. This
Absolutely.
is a great career. This is, you know, I have spent 30 from 88 forward doing this. And it's been a blast. I have taken care of my family very well. I've raised 4 children, and we've had a great life. I've been able to travel doing this, not because I've cut corners, but because I've done the right thing.
Well, Ian, you should be really recognized because, I mean, that's the lesson. That's the mentoring, is that, you know, do it right at all costs. If it's complicated, talk to your clients and tell them what it is. But at the end of the day, you tell them the same thing. You want to do all those lawsuits. You mentioned what it was in California to go to first court and appellate court and stuff. And, you know, it's a personal relationship deal with your client. And you're a great example that you're doing it right. And you hold your backbone up and you call foul if you see something that's wrong with some other survey. But it's research and research and research. Boundary surveys are not cheap. I mean, I think that goes whatever state you're in. But if you express and you have a relationship with the client, that here's the value. This is what's provided. You know, when we're done, you're solid. I'll back you up. I'll go to whatever court you want. And this is a great session today because you have given a great example of all your experience of how, you know, to do your due diligence and do this stuff right. And thank you.
Thank you. And you know, one of the unfortunate things is that good judgment comes from a series of bad judgment and screwing things up. But something that happened today that just drives me up the wall is there was a survey that was turned into me, and a guy finds a tag, a monument tag, and finds no record. So his comment to me was, I don't have to honor that because it's not record. I can only honor record items. And I thought, wow, for a start, if you find a tag, the first thing you do is look up whose tag it is and find out what you can. Give them a call if you can. If they're still alive, give them a call. Some of the most incredible learning sessions that I've had were calling guys and saying, hey, I've got your tag out here and I'm not following why I'm missing it by 3 feet. Can we talk? First time that ever happened to me was with a surveyor who I was told would never spend time with me. He was a gruff old bugger and he would tell me to go to hell. I ended up after hours with a fresh pot of coffee talking about it, and he realized that as we went through things that he'd screwed up where he had put the pipe. So he gave me his original field notes because the copier had already been turned off, and it was an old copier, and it would take half an hour to warm up, and just it'd be a lot easier for you to take my original. And I looked at him and said, "You're giving me your original field notes to go and copy?" He goes, "You're going to bring them back, aren't you?" I said, "Yes, I am, but it's like you wouldn't be here if you weren't trustable." I met John Stahl because I asked a question, breaking down a section, and I came up with a mathematical solution, and I was ready to go and set the center of section. And I was out there with my middle son, Alex, and I'm getting ready to pound this pipe into the ground. And Alex goes, "Dad, what's this?" "Don't bother me, kid." Like, oh, shit. It's a 3/4 inch iron pipe with a tag in it, 5.5 feet south of where I was going to put in my shiny, perfect math position. Ah, shit. So based off, say, a conversation on the old POB forum, you know, what would you guys do? We ended up with a survey. There's Richard Abbott, who's recently passed away from Australia, John Stahl, who else was there? I think we figured we had Leica, or no, Topcon came in, brought toys in. Jason Kilpatrick came in from with a video crew and the whole bit. I think we had what, about 500 years of combined survey experience.
Yeah, Keith Williams was there.
Yeah, that's right. Keith was there.
And Paul Cook.
Yeah, Paul Cook. Yeah. We found what we believe to be the original stone that was set by William Minto 75 years to the day before I was born. And, you know, you're sitting there and you've got Keith Williams and these guys who are feeling all over the stone going, "Yeah, I think this is, yeah, I can feel the 4 in here. This is definitely the quarter corner." And it's like, holy crap. You talk about a mentoring experience, is like, holy, unbelievable.
Crowdsourcing boundaries by social media.
Yeah.
Yep.
But and I mean, we had Shelby Griggs, we had people, we were sending messages out as we were in the field and finding things, and people were all over the country were dialed in going, "Did you, what do you got? Send pictures."
Yeah, we were live streaming it.
That's funny. How long ago was this?
Gosh,
2004.
Okay.
about that, yeah. I
I was
ended up writing a POB article on it too.
September, October POB articles from 2004 cover the Great Sage Stone Hunt.
Yeah, the Sage Stone Expedition.
Yep. It was I mean, it was absolutely fantastic. And what was really cool is you got pictures of my youngest son, who's 6 foot tall now. At the time, we dug looking for a monument. We actually found one of the original pipes that was set, but Colin is actually so far down in the hole that he is holding himself up on the side of the hole with his feet down in the bottom of the hole. We dug that far to be able to find what we were finding there. Yes, the cost for that survey, in terms of the guys who were out there, the experience and travel and the whole business, probably, I don't know, $250,000 worth of effort into that.
Mm-hmm.
Wouldn't have traded the experience for the world though. It was great.
No, it was absolutely unbelievable.
That's cool.
And I know that we were supposed to have inverted the stone and buried it right next to the new pipe. What we ended up doing was concreting that stone in position and I set my tag in the top of that stone and filed the map with that way. I think that was the best way to honor that group, that survey group that day. Unbelievable. But that's the kind of thing that we get into with this brotherhood that we're in, with the people who are actually doing the job properly. And yes, I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there are a lot of people who consider this just to be a job. It's like they're on the job at 7 o'clock in the morning, they're home at 3 o'clock, and there it is, or 4 o'clock, or whatever it is. And they never think about it other than that. And it drives me nuts. Which I'm going to hop in here and see if I can't. I'm going to throw this up here if I can. Where have I got it? I don't see it anywhere.
While you're doing that, George had raised his hand there a couple minutes ago. Go for it, George.
Okay, well, we all have ethical values to uphold. And one of those values that I consider very highly is the obligation to do our job to the best of our abilities and to advise our clients to the best of our abilities. And our job is to solve problems, not create them. And if we can't get our adjoining property owners to sit down together and discuss what we find and come up with a solution, we're missing the boat. Because as you said earlier, Ian, going to court is an expensive proposition. And everything I see on that, you go to court and there's no guarantee who the unhappy party is going to be, but we know there's going to be one.
Yeah, I once had a judge tell me that if he can piss off all the parties to the same extent, he's done his job. And I'm thinking, wow,
Dang.
that's your goal? Piss everybody off? Wow. Here's something that I want to share. I hope you can see this on the screen here, the Lucas letter.
It did not show up yet.
Oh,
Probably-
okay.
Probably a different. Yeah, it's the other screen.
Still in your simultaneous subdivisions.
Yeah, it's still on your PowerPoint.
Okay. All right, then I'm going to point out that one of the things that I learned early on is that a lot of our decisions should be based off the way the court, every boundary that I do, I figure is going to end up in court. So I need to be able to sit back and figure out how the court is going to think about this. And to do that, I need to know how the court thinks. And the only way that I can do that is to get appellate court cases and read them and understand them and go through an IRAC review of them so that I do understand them. So I can sit back and go, well, if you look at the Blackwell court, they're thinking easements differently now and how we're going to handle them. An absolutely fantastic source of information, and this is a shameless plug, and I'm sorry, Trent, I'm going to throw this out there. I'm not getting a penny for this at all.
Oh, you're fine.
Jeff Lucas has, since 2008, produced what he calls the Lucas Letter. Comes out mostly monthly, and he picks out a case from around the country, and he will investigate that, and he will analyze it, and he provides you with the court case itself to read, with head notes that he's added to them most of the time. And he'll break down the case and go through it and go through the thinking behind the case and the judicial thinking. He'll have some sketches in there so you understand what's going on, and then he'll go through the other issues. When you read a case, law schools teach their students to read cases using what's called an IRAC method, IRAC. And it's the issues. What are the issues at hand in the court case? What are they dealing with here? It's a boundary issue between a boundary dispute for whatever reason. That's the I. R is a rule. What are the rules that are being applied to this case here? Well, we're going to use the rules of the doctrine of monuments, or whatever. And then and none of this is really strange. If you Google IRAC, IRAC, case review, you'll get very simple treatises on how to read cases like this. Jeff Lucas's letter is a great one because he is basically going through IRAC on every single one of these cases he presents for you and helping you figure them out. And if you do your own IRAC, you're going to get your own set of notes that are sort of backed up with Jeff's resonance here. The A is the analysis. Every appellate decision, they analyze why they're making the decision that they're making. And the C is the conclusion, what they concluded. So you're taking the issues and coming up with a conclusion at the back end of it. So you're beginning to understand how the courts are thinking. And believe me, when you start reading some of these cases, you start looking at things and you're going, whoa, I wouldn't have thought of that. You'll also look at cases. One of the monster cases is Bryant v. Blevins, fence lines and boundaries. And if you have an opportunity to visit the site of the lawsuit, like Bryant v. Blevins, it's in an area here in Northern California outside a place called Gulf. And what happened there was you got a barbed wire fence that one party was saying this is the boundary and the other one was saying no, it isn't. And it went backwards and forwards and developed a whole lot of things there. But when you go out and see the site, you realize that this was the very first grove of eucalyptus trees ever planted in the United States. And it was a lady who was the daughter of a railroad tycoon who went on her honeymoon to Australia and saw these eucalyptus trees that grow very, very quickly with very, very dense, hard wood. Brought them back to the United States and planted these groves of these eucalyptus trees that turned out to be crap for railroad ties because they're very brittle wood, and you put a railroad engine on top of them, they just go and explode. So you now have these trees that were planted in the late 1890s that are 3 feet diameter. And the barbed wire was strung between the trees when they were only about 2 feet diameter. Well, they weren't put on the property line, they're stapled to the side of the bloody trees. And the minute you go down there and look at the groves and look at the road, you wing at 90 and you're looking at it and going, oh my God, oh my God. This line of trees is nowhere near perpendicular to the street where the property line actually was. None of this ever came out in the court case, by the way. Never came out. The other thing was the guys, both the people who now own the properties came out to talk to me. And the one guy who owned Blevins' house came out and he said, well, let me show you a couple of things, because I got into this when I found out about this. Blevins hated Bryant, absolutely hated each other. They hated each other. So about 10 years before this, Bryant was going to re-drill his well in front of his house. And Blevins got figured out where this guy was going to drill the well. So he went in there very quickly and he threw in, he had a surveyor come out, locate the property line, and he threw in a septic system smack up as close to the property line as he possibly could, so that Bryant wouldn't be able to drill his drinking water well within a certain area of where the leach field was for this septic system for a shop that he was building. And the guy pulled out the permits from the county for building this shop and the leach field. He knew exactly where the boundary was because he'd had it surveyed to put the leach field in as close to the property line as he was allowed to do. That never came out in the court case, ever. It's like, the whole idea was that the property line was unknown. It's like bullshit. You paid a shitload of money to have a surveyor come out and locate that line to the leach field. Liar. And when you do get to look at some of these cases through Jeff's letters, Lucas letters, it's very interesting looking at the pictures and getting into as much information as you can. And I'm a pain in the butt. You know, I will call the county surveyor. I just dealt with a case out of Miami, Goodwin v. Aiken, 1935 map in Dade County. Like, how do I get this map? Oh, I'll send it to you. Let me get you this stuff. And I have the maps that cover the area. And so now I've got the maps that I can look at and read the case with and the whole bit. I don't know of any surveyor who I have ever contacted. Well, no, there are about 3. But most surveyors I've contacted and asked questions of have bent over backwards to provide whatever information they could for me, and always have and always will. Part of that is because if anybody ever calls me and asks me a question, I'm going to spend whatever time I can helping. You know, Rob McMillan called and asked and ran through a boundary situation he's dealing with. And I'll take a look at this map. You know, if he sends a map up for me to take a look at before he turns it in, I'd be more than happy to spend the time doing it because that's my job. Now, I didn't learn this in a vacuum. I learned this from people all over the country, all over the world, have given me information and taught me what I was doing. Kurt Brown knew I was going to take the LS exam, and the only regret that I have with surveying was that he passed away before I got my result back to be able to share with him. You know, John, you know, being able to bounce ideas off John, being able to listen to John, not just in his seminars, but actually sucking down a glass of adult beverage afterwards. Some of the greatest learning sessions that I've ever had were in the hospitality suite with students from Fresno State at the CLSA conferences. I've learned more from the students than I think they think that they've learned from me. But that's the way our industry, or that's the way our profession is. We learn from the people who went before us. When I passed my exam, I went back to one of my mentors, Chuck Willis, and I said, Chuck, I can never pay you what I owe you for this. And he said, you don't owe me anything. The debt is to the people who are coming up behind you. The true value of a profession is that you find people who are willing to learn and spend your time sharing with them your experiences and your knowledge. That's how you pay off your debt. And that's part of the reasons why I'm here tonight. So anyway, Lucas Letter, you can Google the Lucas Letter. It'll take you there. It's $25 a year for a subscription. It's ridiculous. You can also pay a much accelerated deal, and he will send you an exam after you've read through the deal, and he'll send it back to him. He grades it, and you get credit hours for that. It's just a great tool. Mary Lucas, his wife, is a wonderful lady. If you email them asking them about the subscription, understand Jeff's father passed away this past weekend. So Mary is spending her time taking care of Jeff, and they're going to be dealing with family issues for the next week or so. So don't expect anything coming back immediately from them, but Mary will get back to you. Believe me, she's a wonderful lady for doing that.
Hey, Ian. So I had some private messages about forum boards. I went through the whole history of starting with bobplum.com and Mark Deals or PLS. But anyway, Surveyor Connect, it's a plug, but it is a good resource. That's where I met Radu and you and John Stahl and everybody else. So again, don't be ashamed if you're unsure on a boundary. You can throw it out there. You take it for what it's worth, but there's a powerful resource there.
And You know, one of the things that I've always said about said to students in my seminars is as far as I'm concerned, and I don't know that I've ever made a penny off any of the seminars that I've ever dealt with. Part of the deal with you buying seat, listening to me rant on for an hour or 2 hours or half a day or whatever, is you get to ask me questions, not just now, but, you know, send me an email. I will, if I can answer it immediately, I will. If it takes a few days, I do that. I take my phone with me when we travel. And I will not answer your emails when I'm under the water. But as soon as I have time and I can read them, and even if it's a case of, let me think about that, you know, I'm in Fiji, I'll get back to you next week. I will respond. It's part of what I owe for what the life that I get to live now because of the profession. And this is on the screen right now. I hope you can see it here. This is the coroner record that we're going to be turning in on this area that we're resetting these monuments. And yes, as a county surveyor, I actually have 2 guys who work for me who are licensed, and Ron Archer does manages my field operations. So he's the guy who runs the field crews that go out and has done all this. And he turns it over to Rob Hanley, who is my mapping manager. And that's how we keep the 2 bits separate. So it's not a conflict of interest. The guy who's signing the map is not the guy who's reviewing the map. And I make sure that I don't touch this until it's ready to be signed, to keep my fingers off this as much as I possibly can. But we file records of survey. I think I've got 3 of them going right now. That when we, as much as any surveyor out there, I believe that we're required to provide the documentation that every other surveyor is required to do. I don't consider myself above any of them. And in fact, I think that if we run across a problem, that it's the best use of public funds to do a record survey like this to correct the problems that in this case that we kind of created. Bottom line. That's the end of my slide presentation, but some of the things that I wanted to get across is that when you're walking around the simultaneous subdivision, you need to be looking at all the evidence. Cut crosses, cut marks, paint marks, monuments, anything out of the norm, look for it. I mean, the guys used to laugh at me and say, you know, how do you know where to look for these monuments? And I would jokingly tell them, well, don't you see the golden lines for where all the property lines are? You know, when that subdivision map records that the line actually, you can see it right there on the ground, can't you? They would kind of look at me like, yeah, you're straight. But there, after a while, with enough experience, you start looking at things and going, okay, well, it's got to be here. There's got to be something here. This is roughly where the monument should be. One of the things I used to do, you know, take like the state record of survey here, throw all this into CAD so that I now have locations for where everything is. These are search locations. They're called search counts. And I'll go out and I'll find a couple of these points and I'll use those to rotate and scale onto those things, even using the GPS receiver. And then I can use that to go and search for the other points. But I don't sit back and go, wow, look at that point there. It's that tag there, that's off by 200s by 300s. You know, it's like, and I see these maps come into me that somebody has found a point and it's off their mathematical solution. And it's north 33 degrees, 14 minutes, 22 seconds east, 0.02 feet.
Only in California where your search circle is 500s.
Yeah, well, even at that, it's like really, you can get you have equipment that will get you down to the nearest second over, less than 100th of a foot. It's like, wow, I didn't even know they made shit like that. You're really good. But then the next guy comes along and he goes, well, the real property corner, we found that monument. The real property corner is over there, not where the monument is. It's like, no, it's not. And it, constantly on maps I send back, it said, the guys found a monument and it's off. I said, what's your reason for tossing this out? One guy turned in a map. He's got 5 center line intersection monuments on his map. He holds one of them and calls the other 4 out by whatever. So I spoke to him and I said, why did you select that one and throw the rest of them out? He said, oh, well, it's geological creep. So why is that one good? Well, I just had a feeling that it's the best one to hold. Wow. Of course, these are the guys who sit back and they will check between 2 monuments, and they'll call it off by 8/10. And then their calculations based off this is what they're using as their basis of bearings, their calculations, they go out and they call other people off by 1/10 or 2/10 or whatever and set something new. And I'm thinking, okay, well, the first thing that you're telling me is that if you're disagreeing with the length of the line between these 2 monuments, but you're holding your measurement deal here, is that you have 8/10 of a foot floating. What do you mean? Well, what happens if I put the 8/10 of an error down the other end of the line from what you did? All your stuff is off by 8/10. Well, but I held this one. It's like, we can't have a conversation because you don't even understand the language that we're speaking here. And the point there is that it gets back to this whole deal of math. If you're relying on the math, you're wrong. That's all there is to it. Oh, there's another one that I wanted to bring up to you and I wanted to share with you. And it's actually a document and you can Google it. And it's called What Every Lawyer Should Know About Boundaries. And again, if you, I have a PDF of that and I would be more than happy to send it to you. If you send me an email. And it's actually written by a civil engineer and an attorney. And it is probably one of the best articles on boundary surveying and what boundary surveying is all about. If you haven't read it, I highly recommend Googling it or send me an email. My email is real simple, IANW. My first name, my middle name, Ian, W for Wilson, very creative, @ and then I work for Alameda County Public Works Agency, so it's ACPWA. And we're a .org. So EMW at acpwa.org. Email me and tell me you want the link to Jeff's letter, although it's already in the chat list there, or you want a copy of the article, or if you have any questions or anything you want to ask. That's my email. Send me an email. And if you want to see my photos, I will send you the link to my Google let's see, can
While you're looking, I threw in the chat the Cooley PDF. I threw in the chat the Lucas letter, of course, and then I threw in the chat about the IRACs. There was a couple of different ones. I kind of just thumbed through and grabbed those really quick as well. So there's a couple of links on there to grab too. But
Perfect.
and then Surveyor Connect as well is in the chat if those that don't use it. So
And then Rob McMillan here, I threw in a link to a downfall parity with land survey issues.
And I just threw in, if anybody wants to see any of my underwater photos, that will take you to my Google album.
yeah, I did.
My latest photos.
Yeah, those showed up. Perfect.
You know, the one thing that I've got to, I'm really glad that I finally got to present here. This is probably the greatest thing that's happened to surveying across the country. It's an incredible use of time and technology. I'm really tickled to be here, and I'm in awe of Trent for pulling this off and for it running for as long as it has now.
Yeah.
And the crowds that it has, and getting the presenters it has.
Yeah, no, it's been great. Thank you.
Well, Ian, come back. I just sent a message to Trent. You just touched on tectonic shifts and boundaries.
Exactly.
And you in California and me in Alaska, and we get somebody in Oregon and Washington. We ought to talk that the Ring of Fire boys and do one on that. I've got some really good case studies, and I'm sure you do.
Yeah, that'd be a fun one to do.
Yeah, we actually have, we tried to codify what to do with earthquakes and boundaries. And we actually ended up sitting back and we were asked to rewrite the act a few years ago. And we sat back and said, you know what, we really can't. It's entirely so fact driven that we're really sorry, but it's going to be a case by case deal. We can't do anything with it.
Yeah, we have statutory law in Alaska after our big 64 earthquake. It was really much based on C. Albert White's landslides and earthquakes white paper that he did. But as a federal surveyor, you know, we had some stuff that was crazy. So anyway, it'd be a good topic. It's kind of out there on the edges, but it's fun to talk and share to all the people that are behind us, right?
Exactly.
Yep. And it's yeah, John, I will do what I can to get it to Reno. Travel out of the state is often difficult for us here, but it would be a blast to head up there and catch up with you.
Trevor, that's awesome. Congrats.
At some point, I'd love to climb into that Piper with you and go do something silly in the mountains.
In the summertime, of course.
Well, yeah. No, white shit is not something Californians deal with.
Exactly. That's awesome. Does anybody I'm sure we could run down a bunch of rabbit holes, but does anybody have a conversation or something they want to chat real quick about on this topic? I know we've definitely covered a lot of bases already, but does somebody have a specific question or something they want to talk about? No.
This is Rob. I just appreciate Ian's contributions.
Absolutely.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, thank you. Of course. Well, it looks like nobody wants to unmute. So as always, it's a great presentation and great conversations by everybody again. So I appreciate your time, Ian. We definitely we'll chat and try to do some next year as well. Some other presentations, get you back. So it's awesome. Love it. All right, everybody. Have a good week. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Interesting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Trent.
Bye, guys.
Thanks, Ian.